So the Black Templars have been on something of a roll since the last balanced data slate in Warhammer 40k. Let's take a look at the best list around for the Righteous Crusaders of Sigismund. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Templars, and in this video I thought we'd take a look through 4 of the strongest army lists for the faction, all placing well at top tournaments over the last couple of months, and focusing on a few of the units that were taken to achieve those great results. The Black Templars have been having a fairly good time of it in Warhammer 40k 10th edition since it came out. Initially maybe a bit mid-tier, but then the first balanced data slate of the edition really helped them out. They got some perhaps surprisingly good points cuts on a lot of units that were kind of alright already, and as a result their tournament win rate is sitting at one of the strongest ones in the game at around 55%. Definitely an army that's well capable of handling itself against the field, though maybe don't tend to break through quite as much compared with Eldari, Chaos Space Marines and Necrons to actually top events, though that's not stopped them from taking 7 big tournament crowns since the September balanced data slate. With Space Marines having access to multiple good detachments and Black Templars both having strong tanks and strong combat infantry, they've got quite a lot of scope for playing with most of the detachments out there. The most common ones used in big tournaments tend to be things like Righteous Crusaders, Ironstorm Spearhead and Gladius Task Force, though Firestorm and Vanguard are definitely still playable as well. At time of recording, almost all of their unique units are kind of fairly standout good. Helbrecht and Grimaldus are excellent characters. The Sword Brethren Crusader Squad and Primaris Crusader Squad are all pretty awesome in their own way, and getting a whole bunch of the kind of good Space Marine tanks with multi-melters tacked on in place of the stubbers for a very small points increase is generally pretty awesome as well. Between all that, I kind of suspect that in the upcoming balanced data slate, Games Workshop might give them a few nerfs. I'm not sure they've really been the place where they need absolutely drastic changes, though I wouldn't be too surprised to see things like, say, the Firstborn Crusaders go up a little bit at the very least. Most of these units would still be pretty strong, even if you bumped up their points by a very small amount. In any case though, let's take a look at a few of the top tournament lists that talented individuals have been taking to the tops of events around the world. And starting out, I thought it would be interesting to see the highest placing Templar list at the Las Vegas Open. This one run by Ben Sherwine, who used it to make the final 8 and placed very, very highly in this enormous 900 player tournament. And what was very cool is that it seems to have been playing really quite out of the box Black Templars, using the Firestorm Assault Force, the perhaps slightly Salamanders and Transport sort of themed one that is used quite a bit, but maybe not to quite as much tournament success compared with some of the rest. The list is absolutely a mechanised one. The transports are headed up by a Land Raider Redeemer with 3 Black Templar Impulsors and 2 Rhinos following on, all filled with Space Marines ready to purge. The Land Raider Redeemer is a big threat in its own right, threatening massive overwatch with those Flamestorm cannons. The Black Templar Impulsors get the bolt-on multi-melter in place of the stubber, so are far more of a threat than they'd normally be, and otherwise take the Shield Dome and Fragstorm grenade launchers, and 2 Rhinos are here to help out the Firstborn Crusader squads. For contents, it looks like there's a unit of 6 aggressors that go in the Land Raider Redeemer, backed up by the Apothecary Biologist. Kind of interestingly, they still take the Boltstorm Gauntlets here, so they aren't angling for the big devastating wound stratagem that you could get with the Flamestorm, but Boltstorm is definitely mighty. The Apothecary Biologist will give them lethal hits, and it also takes the Forged in Battle traits to flip 1 dice to a 6 each turn, which is pretty handy for getting an auto wound or auto passing a saving throw, and is a great cheap force multiplier in its own right. They could potentially make some good use of the +1 to wound stratagem that the formation has, or potentially even the one to get out and shoot if the enemy takes a pot shot at the transport. Otherwise, to fill out the Rhinos, there's 4 Firstborn Crusader squads. Each of those take a multi-melter, melter gun, power fist and inferno pistol, and a couple of them will be able to fire out with the multi-melters out of the top hatch if it made sense, if they weren't disembarking to get them close within melter range. Multi-melters are a lot scarier in this detachment, where they can get +1 strength within 12 inches. Strength 10 is just so much better for cracking the common toughness 10 tanks. Otherwise, there's 3 units of Sword Brethren, fantastically scary in melee with damage 2 attacks. They take the usual plethora of weapons that they can take. Looks like they'll be riding in the Impulsors, one of them headed up by Helbrecht for enormous damage dealing there, one headed up by the Emperor's Champion, and one by the Judas here who takes Champion of Humanity. That unit will be able to fight first and also gets to ignore any modifiers to their characteristics, which is fairly big against some foes. Finally, there's just 2 units of scouts to round off the list. Could be handy for either screening for deploy to do secondaries and things, or even just guarding the home field. Overall, very cool to see such a different take on Black Templars, and obviously a massive achievement and must have been played spectacularly to get this far in one of the biggest and best tournaments around. You could very easily have waves of Templars disembarking one after the other to move up, kill something and retake an objective as the opponent exposes their army and puts more stuff out into the killing grounds. One of the most common combos for Black Templars is putting High Marshal Helbrecht in with some Sword Brethren. Helbrecht is just great value at 95 points for the massive stats that he brings. His melee gets a sweep and strike mode. The strike mode will usually be strength 9 due to his +1 strength rule, AP 3 and damage 3, or he can get a whole bunch of attacks at strength 7, damage 1. And he can do certain combos in other detachments with getting a 5+ to score a critical hit, potentially meaning that his squad could be getting loads of lethal hits or sustained hits, depending on what other things you've got going on. He also starts the fight phase by handing out a good amount of mortal wounds as well, just crazy value for 95 points. He'll often be found leading Primaris Sword Brethren, 140 points for 5 of them, 3 wound Space Marines with a good mix of heavy weapons. Most will have power weapons, one can have lightning claws, a mastercrafted power weapon, and a thunderhammer, and they get to choose either to get +1 attack or +1 damage to their weapons each fight phase, meaning they're really quite flexible for killing 1 wound infantry or punching up against tougher stuff. These guys are just massively dangerous for their points cost, even if they aren't quite as tough as Blade Guard without the 4+ invulnerable. Next up, we've got an Ironstorm Black Templars list. Ironstorm Spearhead is just a strong detachment for Space Marines in general, and Black Templars are often considered perhaps the strongest chapter to run it with, given that they get a whole bunch of tanks that are kind of basically Space Marine tanks but +1, swapping out the heavy stubber that they have for a multi-melter at very little or no cost. Pretty handy to have another big gun to use those Ironstorm rerolls on. This list was run by a Kevin Zollinger a couple of months ago to place first at the Benbull Clash, a 42-player grand tournament. Leading up this Templar tank spearhead are 2 Tech Marines. One of them takes the Master of Machine War to allow units to advance and shoot or fall back and shoot. Could be quite nice insurance against the army getting tagged in combat too badly. Then for some fast-moving transports, there's 4 Black Templar Impulsors armed with missile arrays, multi-melters and storm bolters. I guess the plan there must be to start the Tech Marines inside them so they have something to start on the board with, and then 2 units of Hellblasters take the other 2. Really quite nice to have them just running and gunning out of the top with a whole bunch of plasma fire. Could be a pretty scary target for the sustained hit stratagem potentially. Otherwise, beyond that, there's 8 scary battle tanks, 3 Gladiator Reapers with the bolt-on multi-melters, pretty brutal against anything with 1 wound, 2 Predator Annihilators with Sponson and las cannons for some dedicated anti-armor, 3 Predator Destructors with 2 Sponson las cannons and 1 with Sponson heavy bolters. I must admit I do quite like the Predator Destructor build with the auto cannon on the top and the Sponson las cannons on the sides. It doesn't get the rerolls or maybe the sheer focus on armor busting that the Annihilator gets in that thing, but you do get a tank that's just very general purpose. Finally, they're supported by some scouts for some objective scoring, armed with missile, sniper and shotguns. Overall, it's definitely a more armoured Space Marine list as opposed to using unique Black Templar options too much. It definitely shows that the chapter can be just very, very strong though, whether you're fielding their unique melee options or just embracing the cheap multi-melter life, and there's plenty of lists that do a somewhat in between of that. Say for this army list you could go a little bit less hard on the tanks and mix it up with some Sword Brethren or Helbrecht in some of those Impulsors perhaps, or run things like some Firstborn Crusader squads with heavy weapons. The Black Templar tanks are just pretty excellent for their bolt-on multi-melters though. Basically wherever they're taken, you just swap out a Ironstorm heavy stubber for a multi-melter. For the Impulsors, it's 5 points to send them up from 80 points to 85 points, and again for the Gladiators it's quite nice at 5 points as well. Some very scary shooting at 18 inches there on top of what the tanks can already bring, which are usually kind of justifiable for the costs already. Not seen in this list, but we did see some in the first one, are the Firstborn Crusader squads. They often can be a popular choice in the Ironstorm Spearhead as well, just given that their rerolls work so well for them. Just 65 points for 5 men are rather great, very cheap just in terms of points per wound, and then you can either add in a las cannon or multi-melter on top of that, plus perhaps a melter gun or plasma gun, and then a power fist and inferno pistol is often the way to go on the sergeant. Overall, they're just surprisingly cheap for what they do. Literally the cheapest Space Marines in power armor out there, which is kind of surprising given that out of the 3 of them, 3 get exciting weapon upgrades. I feel like it's hard to go too far wrong with these in most lists, just providing some cheap bodies and a little bit more anti-tank. Next up, we've got the Black Templars unique detachment in the Righteous Crusaders. This one was a list run by Josh Saltzman, who used it to take first at Balticon GT, a 36-player tournament. Righteous Crusaders often is used to get a 6+ feel no pain type save for the entire army, though you could lean on the melee damage if you wanted. gives you some good combat support stratagems, and it's quite nice for Helbrecht and his sword brethren in particular. As for 1 CP, you can turn on things like lethal hits or sustained hits that go on a 5+ for him, just turning him and his sword brethren squad into an absolute blender unit. In this army, it looks like Helbrecht and an Emperor's Champion each are helming a sword brethren squad, and they look like they're starting in a mighty Land Raider Redeemer to deliver them to the front in style. If that is how they're all getting there, then that's a serious amount of Primaris Rage all in one big metal box. Enemy units definitely wouldn't be able to consider themselves safe to survive when they're within charge range of that little lot. Otherwise, there's Chaplain Grimaldus, who is leading up a big unit of 20 Primaris Crusaders, taking 4 Power Fists there, giving them all sorts of useful buffs, particularly his 5+ Feel No Pain. Then for doing some actions and objective skirmishing, there's 2 units of 5 Jump Intercessors with a Power Fist and a couple of Plasma Pistols in the unit. And then it looks like there's a Dreadnought contingent as well. 2 Redemptor Dreadnoughts, one with Macroplasma and one with the Heavy Onslaught Gatling Cannon, and 2 Ballistus Dreadnoughts. Supporting those is a Tech Marine with the Witch Seeker bolts, amping up his firepower against Psychers a bit there, I suppose. Overall does look pretty intimidating. You wouldn't be able to ignore the melee threat of the Sword Brethren and the attached characters. Grimaldus' squad will give you a really tanky unit of 20 bodies that can handle most things in melee between all of their power fists and things, and there's solid fire support coming from the Dreadnoughts and the Land Raider. Perhaps the iconic Black Templars unit is the Crusader squad, and the Primaris pattern is 10 or 20 models at either 140 or 280. Again, very cheap for Space Marine bodies, even if some of them only get a 4+ save from the neophytes. As well as putting just a sheer amount of bodies on the board, they've got a bunch of hidden power fists within the unit, and their standard Astartes chainswords get 5 attacks. Not entirely sure why they hit so much faster than Assault Intercessors, but it's all good for them, I guess. Rerolling advance and charge rolls is a nice advantage as well, and they can also scout, though I believe that Chaplain Grimaldus prevents them from doing so. In any case, though, a very respectable amount of Primaris Rage, you'd be able to blend most enemy units trying to take objectives with that. Like Helbrecht, Grimaldus is also 95 points. He just seems like a very tempting unit to lead a unit that wants to be a bit more durable as opposed to just dangerous. At the start of the command phase, he can give the unit a 5+ Feel No Pain type save, which is pretty massive against things like damage 2 shooting. That'd be the one that I'd go for as default, and just weigh up whether you want to swap it out for either advance and charge, fallback and charge, or extra AP each turn. Sometimes just the extra charge threat range or squeezing out every pip of melee damage could be worth it. As if that weren't enough, he also allows you to reroll hit rolls for the entire unit, making them more dangerous in combat there. Chips in with his own AP2 Crozius attacks, and comes with 3 Servitors, only one of which is needed to actually get his special rules to work, so you can use the other 2 as bullet catchers for big shots like las cannons potentially. Overall pretty nice, and he does pair with a big chunky 20-man Crusader squad very well, I think. Finally, and our 4th different detachment for the Black Templars today is a Gladius task force, this one run by a Kyle McCord, who used it to take second at Felis Exterminatus, though second only by a little bit it would seem, seeing as he still managed to go 5-0 at this 57-player tournament. Gladius gives you easy access to advance and charge, fallback shoot and charge, and lance melee when things charge into battle, as well as the option for the fearsome fire discipline combo, which of course is in effect in this list, in a big unit of aggressors with Boltstorm gauntlets backed up by the Apothecary Biologist, a spectacularly dangerous unit that can just pulverize most things that get in its way, with a mighty barrage of sustained and lethal hits. Looks like they be delivered by one of the 2 Land Raider Redeemers in this list. Kind of cool to see 2 Land Raiders here. Even if they're not Crusaders, it feels very Black Templars. I'm sure they'll enjoy burning some witches. Otherwise, for transported units, it looks like 3 units of Sword Brethren go in the remaining transport slots. There's room for 2 of them in the other Land Raider Redeemer, and then there's 1 Black Templar Impulsor here with Shield Dome and Fragstorm. It seems that they're headed up by 2 Space Marine captains with Power Fists, one taking the Honor Vehement for a little bit more melee power, and one led by Helbrecht for all the good stuff that he can bring. The 2 captains' choice is kind of interesting. I suppose that they could be fun enough to send in multiple ways of Templars. Being able to get the +1 to wound is really quite big multiple turns in a row. Otherwise, beyond that, it's all objective support stuff. 2 units of Inceptors with the Twin Plasma. Great pinpoint damage and units that can near enough guarantee certain secondary objectives get done. 2 scout squads, always a good choice for screening the midfield and being able to redeploy to jump around the board if they want to. These ones have heavy bolters, shotguns and a chainsword. And finally a lieutenant with a combi weapon who could mark one of the mid-board objectives to have a little bit more damage against the units there. but it's just kind of nice for an annoying to deal with lone operative who can stay safe from enemy firepower and just be tricky to remove from play. Overall, a pretty cool list though, certainly very intimidating to see 2 Land Raiders on the board. The amount of Flamestorm damage that they could threaten would be pretty massive, huge Overwatch threats in their own right, never mind all the scary stuff that's hiding inside ready to tear chunks out of the enemy army. Overall, I feel like Black Templars really are in a very good place right now. Really quite cool to see them doing well with Space Marine detachments of all stripes, and plenty of their unique units being put on the board in very different combinations. Let me know if you've had any luck playing with or against the Templars in recent times. Look forward to hearing all your thoughts on them down in the comments. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that linked in the video description if you'd like to help support. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.